The thoughts I had when I first submitted this proposal and where I'm ended up now is a little bit different. So I'm not going to be quite as technical, but I'll do my best. Let's see. All right, let's go. Actually, before I start, who here, we got the hands for people who are working on Ruby. Who here has ever joined a team with an existing app because they were growing, because they were successful? All right, so that's the majority. How many people here have ever hired people or to join their team because the app that you were working on is successful? Okay, so one of the things I'm going to try and talk about is how we move forward with success. All right, the first thing I want to get out here is that you are a pain in the ass to the business, right? They do not like you. They don't care about your app. They don't care about your code quality. They don't care about the things that you and I care about. The only reason that they deal with you is because it is financially worth it for them to deal with you. You know, that amount of pain that they deal with, it varies by company. Some companies will, deal with wearing jeans. Some people will deal with working remotely. But at the end of the day, every company has a different pain tolerance when dealing with you. And the things that their pain is not your pain. All right, so whoever here has worked on an app that's a piece of shit, raise their hands. All right. How many people have worked on a Rails app that's a piece of shit? Okay. Why is that? And I'm really curious. Why are the apps that we work on, I mean, we're all self-selecting developers. We're all coming here because we want to get better. But why do you guys end up working on apps that are crap? And why are they so bad? I'd love to hear some ideas. Why are apps bad?
Well, one was crap because it was designed as a demo, and then they were like, I love it, ship it.
So shipping a prototype?
Yeah.
That's a good one. Who else? Who else got an idea for why apps are bad that you work on?
Early Rails and just lack of experience on the original team.
Yeah, lack of experience on the original team. Yeah.
High turnover and lack of code consistency.
High turnover, lack of code consistency. Yeah, if you ever have to know the anthropological history of your app in order to figure out why decisions were made, that's a sign of a bad app. Is anybody here familiar with Conway's Law? Have you guys ever heard of this? Okay, so Conway's Law states that organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures within these organizations. This gets back to my earlier point where you are a pain. And sometimes business people don't want to communicate with you. They don't have a vested interest in communicating with you. And so that structure is going to find itself in your app. Now I am really, this hurts me, this whole idea that we can work in Ruby and we can have pain in our apps because of other people that are outside of our group. Because one of the things Matt said that I learned early on in the Ruby community is that Ruby is designed to make programmers happy. And it kills me whenever I'm not happy and I'm working within Ruby. I can't move this. All right. So I've worked on multiple applications over time, and I have had this problem time and time again. Okay, so I didn't know how to start this, so the setup was over. The number one problem. What's the number one problem when dealing with app design, with poorly designed apps? If you could sum it up in one word, what's the problem with Rails apps, and why are they not as maintainable as they should be? Why are we not as happy dealing with them as we should be? Love to hear people's real thoughts. Single monolithic architecture throughout the entire application. Absolutely. Right? That is the number one biggest problem with all these apps. And all the time that I've gone and I've worked on different apps, And I've gone from company to company, organization to organization, group to group. The biggest issue I have is that I see an app that is a monolithic ball of mud, and it does just way too much. And it hurts me in my soul. And usually, what this tells me, what I look for, and I see this, is that there's no clean separation of responsibility within the model layer, right? That's like the biggest warning sign. So like, have you ever like opened up a Rails app? So there's two bad things. Have you ever opened up a Rails app, I'm getting off the slides, open up a Rails app, and then you've got like 25 controllers, and you've got like 23 models. Has everybody worked on that app? Like that, oh, that's a terrible app. Conversely, have you ever opened up like the app models layer and then looked at, you find like your post model, and then you find a post directory right next to it, and inside you've got like associations and find all these other kind of files, and they just took their like 2,000 line post model and just broke it up into different files, so you're never really sure where you're going to find the method you're looking for.
I wish our code was that well structured.
No, that is not a sign of a well-structured code. That's a sign of a very, very fat model. All right. So, unfortunately, the reason for this is that Rails just makes it really easy for people to shoot themselves in the foot. And as much as Rails is really, designed to give you good conventions for model view controller and tell you where you're going to put your code, it gives you very, very little guidance on how you're actually supposed to structure and design your code. So the first thing I want to talk about is models, and I'm kind of stressed. I don't have as many examples as I would like to, but models end up getting most of our. I'm really nervous. I apologize. Models end up getting the majority of our attention within our apps. So we're going to start there. Before I start there, though, I want to have a slight detour, slight aside, and talk about testing, because I think testing is another problem. Again, another raise of hands. Who here has ever been paid to work on an app that has very little testing? And let's be honest, that's like pretty much everybody. All right, this is a real problem and continues to be. I mean, who here right now is actively working on a project that has subpar testing? Okay. Again, I think that's the majority of the room. Okay, we're not all going to become masters at testing overnight, but I want to just touch on a couple key points about testing. First is that test-driven development is not quality assurance. It is not QA. That is not its role. Tests are there to ease pain. As much as the business kind of deals with pain to get the value that they get from us and from the apps that we build, tests are there to help ease our pain that we have when dealing with these applications. We have pain in lots of areas that testing is going to help. The first pain we have is just trying to design the app, trying to determine what it is that the app is supposed to do. So test-driven development gives us that because it helps us to start that process and put something down in a file that tells us what this model is going to do. It also helps ease the pain that we have as we refactor our app, right? But it is not quality assurance. It's not QA. And so if you're in a large organization, don't make that mistake. And whatever you do, don't try to put QA into your app, because all that does is slow down development. So the big thing for me when dealing with monolithic apps is pain, and more pain, and even more pain. Testing helps that. I think that the reason why we deal with so many apps that don't have good test coverage is because we have two lines here. We've got the non-test driven line, which is kind of the even line, and then we have the curved line. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The straight line is more of the test driven, and then when we don't have tests, we have that curved line. And what that means is that as we add new features, as we fix bugs over time, the cost of fixing those bugs rises over time. The larger our code base gets, the more time we spend on adding new features. But it's this gap right here. This is what people don't want, right? When you start a new app, when you're just trying to get something out there, you think that, well, if I test, then I'm going to have more, it's going to take more time to actually get it done, so I'm not going to do it. So I don't necessarily think that the developers are not testing because well, some are testing because they don't know how to test. But I think that we have a shortcut, and we don't want to feel the pain. We don't want to take that time, and we associate the time that we're going to take to add the test as pain, and we want to avoid pain. But here's the thing about tests. I think we confuse them quite a bit. I think that as far as development time, model tests cost less than like full acceptance tests when you're loading up the browser, right? I think that's pretty well true. I think you can probably cross out cost and put pain, right? And so we want more. So it's easier to add model tests than it is to add full application tests. But the inverse is true on actually the return on investment. We get more out of model tests than we do in browser tests. So there's a really great presentation. It's called Integration Tests Are a Scam. It's on InfoQ by Jamie Brainsberger. It's a really fantastic presentation that goes through and talks about how integration tests are how they are a false sense of security. And that what we really want to do is have more model, have more unit tests. And also, I once heard Ryan Davis say that he wants like 30 unit tests for every acceptance test. So model tests cost a lot less, and we get a lot more out of them. That's kind of the point. Okay. But I really dislike monolithic models. It really bugs me. I have two rules when I'm opening up a new Rails app and I'm looking at it, or I'm trying to maintain something over time. The first rule I have is I want declarative code. Okay, I want the code to tell me what and not how. And it's a very subtle difference I think a lot of people don't always end up thinking about. The other thing is that I want a consistent level of abstraction in the code. If you're going to break down from a higher level to a lower level, then that needs to happen within a different method. Right? So within any given method, I want a consistent level of abstraction. So here's an example, and we had this earlier with Jeff's talk, and we couldn't get the exact code, but this is kind of what he was talking about, where on the very right-hand side, we've got tag, then we call all the articles and we get the length. Remember, that was kind of a problem because what that ends up doing is it pulls all of the articles into memory, and then it just takes account on that. Now, the problem I have with this code, though, is that the code is actually doing a lot of things, right? So we have our object, we're going through all of our tags, it's an object, but then we know that that tag has an association, and that association is going to, have some value on length that's going to tell us something that we want to put in there. Now, from the views perspective, I think, the views doing too much, and a lot of times folks talk about don't put logic in the views, and in my mind, I see this as actually having logic in the views. I think that logic could be somewhere else. What I would prefer to see is something like this, where we have an article count method, right? So we're not going out, we're not exercising an association, we're not, doing anything else. It's just we have all the values that we need to put them on the page. All right. So the way we can do that is it's really easy. We just go ahead and just create a method called article count. I think this used to be an inactive record by default, but I don't think it's there anymore. Now, what's really great about this is that now this just becomes part of the surface area of this object, and it's always there. And then if you ever, and I was talking to someone earlier this morning, and they kind of mentioned that doing a select count star is slower than doing a select count ID. And so we can kind of change this and improve the performance of our application, the micro improvement, by actually selecting the ID and then doing the count on that. But this doesn't change our view. So a lot of times this is called the law of the meter. Who's heard of law of the meter? Well, okay, about half. Or the principle of least knowledge, right? So we don't want to see too much. I had another example, but I didn't quite get any slides. Let's stick on views for a second. This is an example I pulled out of an open source project. And this is actually not bad for the project, right? But let's be honest. This looks familiar, right? Raise your hand. Who does this look familiar to? I mean, pretty much everybody should see stuff like this. So again, I go back to my two principles. I want it to be declarative. I want it to declare my intent. I want to say what and not how. And I want it to maintain a consistent level of abstraction. And we're just going all over the place on this, right? So what we have here, and actually I had to clean this up because even when I first looked at it, I wasn't entirely sure what it was trying to do. But we've got just an if statement with 3 clauses. One, we have a bunch of conditionals, and then we're going to say, if those conditions are met, we want to render the partial join course. Then we have the second one, and if those conditions are met, we want to render a drop course partial. And then we have a third, so if we don't render the first one, we don't render the second one, and we meet some session value, if some session value exists, then there's going to be a bunch of HTML that shows up. Now, one of the ways that we can address this is we can use helpers. And if we use helpers, and if we kind of design this from that very declarative, tell me, don't show me approach, it would probably look like this, right? We probably have some method that says, hey, can I join a course? And then if so, render the join. Can I drop the course? And if so, render the drop partial. And if not, then do I have some sort of temporary permission? Because I'm assuming that's what the session code is doing. But if we look back here, we're talking about consistent level of abstraction. We're all over the place, right? We're checking to see if an object is there. If so, we want to check a couple of different values and see if we don't have something in session, right? And this is not really like logic. We're not, trying to figure out whether or not an invoice is valid in order to submit an order, but there's still a lot of logic in here determining this. Now, when you write this, you're not thinking that, right? You're probably just saying, oh, we're not supposed to render that partial if also that course enrollment is active, right? So, or we only render it if it is active. So if it's not active, don't render it because you can't drop it if it's not active. And so, someone just goes in and quickly adds it. But if we have these helpers here, we can kind of hide a lot of those details away. Or of course we can use presenters. I think the slide's out of order. Here's the helper. So we can just shove all of that into the helper. We can replace the actual call for the session, create a method for that has a more declarative name. Anyways, I think this is a little bit better. The other thing we can do is we could use a presenter. And the way I use presenters are kind of like view models, right? What I love about here, the helper, is that I can unit test this now, right? And before, we had the other way with all of those inline decisions. The only way that you really had to unit test that was to do an acceptance test, right? And those were really expensive and were very slow. And I know one Cucumber suite that takes well over 3 hours to run. And that has just a crippling effect on development, and you're not using it. So, we're trying to, we're taking these good principles of design, and we're going to have better code for it. And, anyways. So, presenters, I kind of think of as view models. It's very, very similar, right? And again, I think that testing an object is a little bit easier than testing a helper, right? So, functionally, these two solutions are relatively similar, but the thing I like about this solution is that I have an object I can test, and just eventually that makes it easier. Again, my 2 criteria: declarative, and then maintain a consistent level of abstraction. Now, we've had a lot of really great presentations already talking about services. The same thing applies not just to your models, not just to your views, but also to your apps. I'm a big fan of breaking apps up, but I don't think I have enough time. And then what I will say, though, is there's a really great book called Rails Anti-Patterns, and you should buy that and read it. What I want to talk about next, again, how do you manage success when you're trying to build a team? That's really kind of the core of what I want to talk about. And so I want to pose this question of what code is, right? What do we do every single day? What is it that we're actually doing when we sit down and we type on the keyboard? Right? What are we producing? Anybody have any ideas? Any thoughts? It's kind of a philosophical question, but what is code?
Somebody else's problem.
Somebody else's problem. Is what? Is language. Anybody else? Making ideas concrete. Yeah. So everybody should, I hope, is familiar with the SICP book, the Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. It's a seminal book that you should read. In the preface, it has this quote, and I love this quote, and I love this idea. Underlying our approach to this subject is our conviction that computer science is not a science, and that its significance has little to do with computers. The computer revolution is a revolution in the way we think and in the way we express what we think. We want to establish the idea that a computer language is not just a way of getting a computer to perform operations, but rather it is a novel, formal medium for expressing ideas about methodology. Thus, programs must be written for people to read and only incidentally for machines to execute. We believe that the essential material to be addressed by a subject at this level is not the syntax of a particular programming language constructs, or clever algorithms for computing particular functions efficiently, nor even the mathematical analysis of algorithms and the foundations of computing. And this is the key. But rather the techniques used to control the intellectual complexity of software systems. I believe that software is intellectual complexity, and that we are workers of knowledge. We deal with intellectual complexity. The reason I love this is because this tells us that programming, what we do, is a human activity, right? And think about that. You know, we work with machines, but at the core of what we do, it is a human activity. And I think that the reason we get in so much trouble with software and with what other programmers execute is because for some reason in our Western culture we try really, really, really hard to eliminate this human element from programming. And sometimes we have companies who try to eliminate the human element from programming, make it kind of more rote. And sometimes we do it to ourselves, right? There's a really good quote by Max that I love. Often people, especially computer engineers, focus on the machines. They think by doing this, the machine will run faster. By doing this, the machine will run more efficiently. By doing this, the machine will something, something, something. They are focusing on the machines. But in fact, we need to focus on the humans, on how humans care about doing programming or operating the application of the machines. We are the slaves, they are the masters. So again, one of the reasons...
Other way.
Oh, sorry. We are the masters, they are the slaves.
No, you had it right.
One of the reasons I'm really glad to be here is because I love conferences, I love meeting with folks, because you guys are self-selecting. You guys want to be here, especially Ruby conferences. It's way better than the Java and the .NET conferences, because you guys are like the 20%. There's an adage that 20% of people do 80% of the work. But you guys are the 20%. But I kind of wonder about the 80%. The 80% are the people that we work with and the people that build these applications. And at the core of it, we can spend a lot of time and effort building coding standards. But what we do is we work in ideas. And we work in those ideas with other people. And we cannot underestimate the human element in what we do. We're not going to be able to scale our applications to meet the demand of the growing business without working with other people. So I was just earlier this week I was talking to a coworker, and we were talking about hiring because we're in a big hiring mode right now. And he was of the opinion that we needed to get like all A+ talent, right? Just A players, and that's really what we need because we're not going to be able to meet our needs with just kind of normal programmers, right? We need only the 20% and none of the 80%. The 80% that's not here. And I fundamentally disagree with that because you can take anybody and make them better. And so the focus for me is on trying to work with other developers and make them better. I also heard another great story recently about a team that was just chock full of talent, right? And they had people working there that would be the envy of many, many companies, but because of the dynamics of the team, they were dysfunctional and got nothing done, right? So the focus, as much as we should focus on code quality, as much as we should focus on splitting up our monolithic apps and putting them into services, at the core of this, we need to focus on our teammates. And so with that, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. That you guys are awesome, and that when you have a particular problem working with people on your team, just remember that you're going to tolerate and love them. And the reason is because friendship is magic, and with magic you can get anything done. Thank you.